Hello, everyone. Welcome to week number 3 in Science 260. This week is all about fashioning or producing an inquiry-based question surrounding your topic. So let's see what we've got going on. Last week, in week 2, we evaluated sources for credibility. So we looked at sources and determined how credible they were. So if you look at a website and it's opinion-based and there's no date on it and you don't know who funded it, doesn't have much credibility. If you find primary research in a scientific journal, then you know that it is peer-reviewed and so it should be a good source of information. So that's one way to evaluate sources. This week, you're going to develop a question to ask about your topic that you could design experiments around to answer the question. So here's some things that you're going to cover in your textbook, and also there's a video and there's some written information in the module for this week. You will look at independent versus dependent variables. So the independent variable is the one that the scientist manipulates. It can be time. So you're examining what happens to some particular topic over time. So you're manipulating the time, right? And then you want to see what happens to this particular variable. That variable is called the dependent variable. The dependent variable depends on the independent variable. So independent variable is the one that the scientist manipulates. Dependent is what happens because of the independent variable. Take a look at your textbook in chapter 3 on that section in chapter 3. Chapter 3 starts on page 73 in your textbook. You will also look at the difference between qualitative and quantitative data. If at all possible in science, you want to have quantitative data, where numbers are involved, where you take measurements, where you count things. Qualitative is, yes, this happens, no, that doesn't happen, that sort of thing, or opinions, or polls, or all sorts of data like that. Look at your STEM research under the resources section for this week, and there's a good explanation for this. Plus, there are a couple of questions for you to take a look at as practice questions to see if you can determine what is qualitative type of data versus quantitative. So that's good practice for you before the quiz that you take. And then there's a video on developing an inquiry-based question. So inquiry-based question just means it's a question where you're asking a question about something and you plan on figuring out how to answer it, right? And usually in science, that's through experimentation. This is also under the resources section, your STEM research. All right, review the module guide because there is a lot of information there. So make sure you read through all of that. This gives you a lot of information about what is going on this week. And you will see in just a minute that you're going to have a quiz over this. It's online, but I'll get to that in just a second. Skim chapter 3 in your textbook. It starts on page 43, like I explained. And there's all kinds of good information there. There's a wonderful example. It's one of the ones that I always used in microbiology. Barry Marshall was a scientist, and still is a scientist, sorry, was and is a scientist who experimented on Helicobacter pylori. It's a type of bacteria that was very difficult to identify in the stomach, but and to grow and culture in a lab. Very difficult. One of my friends in graduate school actually got these bacteria to grow in culture, which was quite a feat. But these are bacteria that we now know cause stomach ulcers. So for a long, long time, many decades, ulcers, stomach ulcers, ulcers in your small intestine, everybody thought was caused by eating the wrong foods, like spicy foods or acidic foods or just stress, etc. So there were lots of different causes that people thought ulcers were caused by. But then along comes Barry Marshall, and he discovers these bacteria in the stomach, and the fact that when they attach to the lining of the stomach, this creates inflammation, and your inflammatory response actually eats a hole through your stomach, and that's an ulcer. So he was trying to show this in his scientific work, and nobody believed him because everybody believed ulcers were caused by spicy food, stress, etc. So what does he do? He drinks one of his cultures of Helicobacter pylori, and lo and behold, he develops ulcers. And not only that, then after that, he takes antibiotics, which kill the bacteria, and then he doesn't have stomach ulcers anymore. So, talk about the germ theory in action right there, showing where microbes cause diseases. He did it in his own lab. Now, no one should do experiments like that. Is that not the craziest thing ever? But he did. He drank one of his own cultures of Helicobacter pylori. This shows you how science can work. It's inquiry-based. He developed a question and decided to answer it on his own and be his own guinea pig. There's a lot of important information in this chapter about biases and different types of bias. That, for example, the researcher brings in bias because you have an idea of how you think this is going to work. You have an idea of what you think is happening here. And so you bring that bias in. If you are using clients or subjects or patients as your test subjects, then they bring bias. So what's really popular now, and has been for a long time, is what are called double-blind studies. And this is where the researcher and the subject, in this case, neither one knows what the treatment is. And so there's going to be treatments, and they're going to be placebos. Placebos are basically salt water or something like that. Just inert types of treatments where you don't expect anything to happen because you're not getting any kind of treatment. So a double-blind study is where no one knows who's getting which treatment. And then you see what happens. And so what does that do? That removes bias from the researcher and from your test subjects. So be sure and read that section on biases and how important it is to remove bias, because we don't want anything determining our results besides the actual phenomenon that is happening, right? And you're going to look at your types of data here. Qualitative versus your quantitative is also, there's an explanation in the textbook. So read through that. So besides in that section on our website, there's also a part in the textbook that discusses that. All right, and then you're going to take the week 3 quiz online. It counts for 45 points, so that's actually a good number of points. Make sure you take that. You only get 2 attempts, so be aware of that. 2 attempts and then you're done. But you take that online, and right now I can't even see the questions, so I'm not sure what they are or what that actually looks like. I guess I will shortly here. Then your Module 3 assignment. It's a fairly big assignment. There are lots of parts to it. There are not as many parts as in week 1, but anyway, here are the parts. So let me talk about them each. So the first part, you're going to describe your topic, including your background information that you've already looked up from your sources, right? So describe. Okay, anytime you see the word describe, that is not a 1-sentence answer. Describe means you got to give detail about this particular information. And so that means at least a paragraph. And a paragraph is 3 sentences or more of very substantive information. So describe your topic, including the history, cause, nature of the issue, etc. All right, the second part, explain. That's another one. Explain is not 1 sentence. It's going to be a paragraph. An inquiry-based question related to your issue. right? So nobody in our class is going to have ocean acidification as their topic. I don't think I've seen anybody with that. So here's a type of question that you could ask. As the pH of ocean water decreases, then what happens to the calcium in seashells? How quickly does it dissolve? You could ask a question like that. If you decrease the pH of the ocean water, does the calcium in the shells of seashells dissolve? So that could be a question. And then you're going to identify the independent and dependent variables. In my example here, what was I changing as a scientist? The pH of the ocean water. Well, and that's the independent variable. The dependent variable would be what I was measuring, and that's the loss of the calcium phosphate in the seashells. All right, then you're also going to describe the cause and effect between the independent and dependent variables. So why is this happening? Why is the lowering of the pH going to change the seashells? Describe it. And then what will be the evidence that shows your connection between the variables? How do you know this actually the lowering of the pH of the ocean water that is changing the seashell composition? Evidence. And that's the scientific perspective section of the rubric this week in the guidelines. And then what type of data will be analyzed by your investigation? Is it going to be qualitative? Is it going to be quantitative, right? Are you going to get numbers out of it? Are you going to get answers? Okay, so that is your Module 3 assignment for this week. It's a little bit longer, but you are going to delve a little bit deeper into your topic and figure out a question that you can ask about it. All right, my tip of the week this week is to follow your guidelines and your rubrics for completing your assignments. This is very important, and if there is a template, use the template to produce your work, because that makes sure that you cover all the sections in the right order and answer everything that you need to answer. Okay? If you need anything this week, I am here to help you. I am here to answer questions. If you are totally stumped, which happens sometimes, you're not used to this subject area, so all you need to do is ask me. m.sigmon@snhu.edu. I will be glad to help you. With that being said, I hope that you have a wonderful week this week.